Help Wanted 2 is a game with loads of potential when it comes to lore, and trust me, I may have done a video on it already, but I am not done, as I'm planning to focus on it for a while. The theory I'll be discussing today is a bit different from my previous one about Help Wanted 2, as instead of talking about the distant future, it will talk about the forgotten past of the organization that caused everything, Fazbear Entertainment. Let me warn you, this theory goes deep into the realm of speculation, so if a theory based purely on facts is what you're after, look elsewhere on my channel. But before we get started, I just wanted to thank all of you for helping my small channel grow so much lately. In a month, we've gained over 200 subscribers and my views are higher than ever, so let's keep the streak going and try to get to 500 subscribers before February ends. You can help out right now by subscribing. Hundreds, even thousands of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and there's a pretty high chance you, the viewer, aren't either. So what do you say you subscribe? It costs you absolutely nothing and helps me out a lot. Anyway, let's get started. Sun, Moon, the daycare attendant, Eclipse. This animatronic goes by many names and many descriptions, but we still know close to nothing about his origins, about who he really is. For simplicity's sake, I'll refer to this animatronic as Eclipse throughout the rest of the video unless a different name is necessary. The first time we saw Eclipse was in Security Breach, where he appeared as the somewhat friendly sun when the lights were on, and turned into Moon when they turned off. Now yet again, we see him in Help Wanted 2, appearing as Sun, Moon, Eclipse, and a new mysterious iteration called Jackamoon, which we're going to talk about today. Initially, this guy didn't seem very interesting, he just felt a bit out of place. Who is this guy? What's his story? And most importantly, what can he tell us about the beginning of Fazbear Entertainment? If you remember, around 3 months ago, I released a video talking about Eclipse from Ruin. I came to some pretty interesting conclusions, and almost all of them went back to one thing: Eclipse is older than we think. Every time I reference a fact I mentioned in that video, I'll leave the thumbnail in the corner so you can remember to check it out. I suggest you watch that video if you haven't already, because the evidence I presented in that one is very important to today's theory, which is essentially a follow-up to it. So strap in theorists, because we're about to start overthinking. First off, I encourage you to look at Jackamoon's design. Simple clothes, including simple cloth pants and wooden features, along with a big smile. He's definitely not part of a modern line of animatronics like the Glamrocks. These design elements all point to one thing. This guy is definitely made by a small company, someone with few resources to use, and definitely someone who hasn't caught up on what kids liked for a long time. Our modern idea of animatronics was created in the early 1960s, with robot characters created by Walt Disney's employees starring in theme parks and attractions. Animatronics faded out of relevancy until the 80s, when restaurants like Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese's quickly took center stage. We can apply that real-world historical knowledge to Jackamoon as well. We know for a fact that he's an animatronic, although probably not a very successful one. Before I get to my point on this, I'd like to call your attention to one other series of minigames in Help Wanted 2, the Fazbear Blast games. In these, you're tasked with shooting down a variety of different targets at multiple Freddy Fazbear locations, while the Carney animatronic cheers you on. If you compare the aesthetic of this Fazbear Blast area with that of Jackamoon, we can see that they share some kind of vibe, a look that unites them in some way. And let me tell you, this connection was far more important than I ever thought it would be. But remember how I brought up the real-life history of animatronics? Well, the popularity of animatronics beginning in the 60s and dying off before coming back in the 80s is really important to finding out the time period of Sonny Boy Here's creation. We know that Fazbear Entertainment was founded in 1983 and that all of the Freddy's locations and properties peaked in the mid-80s. So wouldn't it make sense for the first location to be created in the late 70s when interest in animatronics was waning but still not completely gone? Well friends, to that I say no, because there's confirmation that Freddy and the gang's grandparents are older still. In Help Wanted 2, we can find a poster for a Fall Fest event, dated 1970. If you don't remember, Fall Fest 83 was featured in the DLC to the original Help Wanted, Curse of Dreadbear, with very strong connections to the events of FNAF 4. And it's almost definitely a Fazbear property, so I think the Fall Fest of 70 could be the true beginning of the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you beat the Fazbear Blast minigames in a specific way, the little Fall Fest booths light on fire. This is true in all of the Fazbear Blast minigames, implying that Fall Fest 1970 came to a fiery end. Oh, and remember Jackamoon? Remember how he has hints of orange and yellow in his character design? Also, what do we usually put inside jack-o'-lanterns? That's right, all those things point to fire. So whatever the connection between Jackamoon and Fall Fest is, it's gotta be pretty significant. Well friends, to solve this mystery, I remind you to remember the two people that started it all, William Afton and Henry Emily. You know which one of those two has a soft spot for arson? That's right, Henry. So, could it be true? Was Henry responsible for the fire at Fall Fest 70? Well, theorists, I think so. I propose that Fall Fest's main attraction consisted of two animatronics. Carney, an animatronic bear with an irritating southern drawl built by Henry, and Eclipse, a theatrical animatronic who was part of a simple stage play where the good side of a jester, Sun, and the bad side, Moon, fought over control, with the good side eventually prevailing. This was William's creation. We know this is true because of the tales from the Pizzaplex book Submechanophobia, where it stated that Eclipse used to be a theatrical attraction. Kids flocked to see the jester, and Henry's crude, boring bear was quickly overshadowed by William's eccentric creation. So, Henry got a little mad. And by a little mad, I mean he burned the place to the ground. This is what Henry means when he addresses the player in the insanity ending of FNAF 6. A wound first inflicted on me, one that I then let bleed out into all of this. Henry's pride, his ego, was wounded by William's superior creation, and he then let it all bleed out by burning down Fall Fest and beginning the horror. Unluckily for Henry, however, William's creation wasn't gone. It somehow survived the fire, with Carney instead being the one that suffered the most damage, his animatronic fur becoming charred black, and his clothes gone entirely. As the embers danced across Carney's ruined frame, Henry knew he wouldn't let Carney be forgotten. He would somehow avenge the destruction of his project. His ego was too big to accept. At this point, William probably thought this was a freak accident, likely caused by faulty wiring or something like that. But eventually, he'd find out the reality of what happened on that day. His friend's rage and jealousy were what led his first and possibly best creations near destruction, rendering it temporarily or possibly permanently unusable. But this unfortunate incident was quickly set aside, replaced by ideas of a family-friendly pizza joint called Fredbear's Family Diner. As for William's damaged creation, Eclipse, that was swiftly auctioned off to a small theater company. Whatever happened to that thing wasn't William and Henry's problem anymore. Fredbear's was doing great, and they planned on starting another company, together with a huge chain of pizzerias, Freddy Fazbear's. You see, Henry really liked bears. Carney, his first real attraction, still held a spot in his heart after all those years. Fredbear had been his idea, as well as Freddy Fazbear. William was a little bitter about this, as his character Bonnie was pushed aside, but it wasn't too big of a problem, as long as the business prospered. But then, on one fateful day in 1983, disaster struck. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to, the bite of 83. Fredbear malfunctioned, taking the life of one of William's children. Obviously, he was devastated, but even more than that, he was angry. This was Henry's fault. Fredbear was faulty and dangerous. William's creation, Spring Bonnie, couldn't cause so much damage. Things only got worse from there. William found out that Henry had been hanging onto the blueprints for Carney, that stupid bear from all those years ago. He also found schematics for a new version of him, a black bear with a star in his chest and an equally stupid name. The design was identical. Henry had learned nothing. Then William understood that it was Henry who had burnt down Fall Fest. He had recently run another version of Fall Fest, but it didn't feel the same. And yet again, Henry had made a crappy animatronic bear for it, which he dubbed Dreadbear. The thing was practically falling apart. It needed constant repairing and attention, which Henry insisted was part of its character. Apart from that, he also designed a series of annoying barnyard animals called the Mediocre Melodies, with every single one of them having some kind of annoying American accent, except for one. Orville Elephant. William was sure this one was a direct jab at him. William was tired of this. He would give Henry a piece of his mind. And that, my friends, is my idea of the origins of Fazbear Entertainment. This theory is definitely going to be controversial, and it's very largely speculation, but I hope it made you think about the possible true beginning of the FNAF franchise. Thus, I think Jacqueline and Carney are vital to understanding how the beginning of the FNAF timeline and the end of it link together, with Jacqueline likely being one of the first animatronics made by William, and Carney having very strong connections to Lefty, as well as being the first bear animatronic. Like I said earlier, I highly recommend you watch my first Eclipse video, as it also discusses some ideas that are important to this theory. Yet again, like, subscribe, and never stop overthinking.